Hi, I'm David Manti, and welcome to a new episode of the Today in Manufacturing podcast. With me this week are Jeff Ranke and Anna Wells. We each have more than 15 years of experience covering the manufacturing industry. Every week, we cover the 5 biggest stories on our websites and discuss the implications they have on the industry going forward. Before we get started, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You could also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. If you want to email the podcast, you can reach any of us at Jeff, David, or Anna at IEN.com with email the podcast in the subject line. We're also live every Thursday, so you can subscribe on YouTube at IEN Magazine so you can get a notification whenever we go live. Anna, it's good to have you back this week. How you doing?
Thanks for having me back after I unceremoniously just bailed on last week. I wasn't trying to.
No, you had a lot going on.
I had a lot to do. I had to do some other work.
We even gave the tease last week, like, check your mailboxes for the, next issue of IEN Magazine.
Yeah, it all got done, so.
Yeah.
Thanks to Andy Zoll.
That, overwhelming relief once you send it off to the printer.
It's indescribable.
And then it all starts again.
All starts again.
Well, it's good to have you back.
Thanks.
Jeff, how you doing this week?
Good. We finally got the team back together here. Got the band back together.
That's right. It's been a bit. We're back together and on a Thursday, roughly at 2. It feels almost a little too normal.
Yeah.
Instead of the new normal now, it's going to be the too normal.
The too normal.
Yeah. All right. Well, before we jump into our first story this week, we have a message from our new sponsor, Big Commerce and Data Extreme. Hi, I'm David Manti, and with me today is Chris Harrington. We're talking about the future of B2B e-commerce for manufacturers. Chris, does anyone ever want to call you about the price of an O-ring?
They never want to. Unfortunately, often they have to because, many of our manufacturing friends out there do not have an e-commerce presence yet to make it easy for customers to go and make those repeat purchases or simply get the price and availability for that O-ring and get it ordered so that they can finish the job that they're working on over the weekend, right? So, yeah, our customers don't want relationships with us for the price of an O-ring. Let's have the great conversations with our customers on the important tasks and leave the tasks that can make our customers more productive and our own employees more productive. Let's leave that for our online tools.
Let's leave it for the tools, and let's talk about it a little bit more in great detail. July 30th, please join us for the future of B2B e-commerce for manufacturers. Register below. We'll see you there. And we're back. And I was a little mistaken. This episode is actually brought to you by 2 different sponsors. This episode is brought to you by Big Commerce and Data Extreme. Manufacturers are quickly discovering that e-commerce is no longer a capability that is just nice to have. Rather, it has become mission critical for those wanting to stay competitive on a global level. So, we assembled a crack team of e-commerce experts to provide guidance and real-world solutions. So register now to join us for the future of B2B e-commerce for manufacturers on July 30th. It's not just Chris Harrington, but it's also Kurt Anderson, Jessica Williamson, and Nicole Donnelly. All right, our first story this week. Widespread tech outage disrupts companies around the world. Last Friday, a bad software update from a global technology outage disrupted companies and services around the world. The issue put a spotlight on many companies' dependence on just a few providers. The update was issued by cybersecurity firm CrowdStrike and hit 8.5 million machines running Microsoft Windows. It wasn't a cyber attack, but airports, banks, hospitals, all were hit by the IT outage. By Tuesday, CrowdStrike CEO George Kurtz was called to testify to Congress about his company's role in the widespread outage, and yesterday, the company said a bug allowed its cybersecurity systems to push bad data out to millions of computers and caused what some have claimed to be the largest IT outage in history. Jeff, so what's the saying? Don't put all your eggs in the same IT basket.
Well, I think that's a little bit of an oversimplification because I think most folks do have multiple IT tools, security tools that they're using here. It's not just CrowdStrike. But whenever you ask a lot of analysts about what happened here, well, they should be using more stuff like maybe the one that I champion
Like my
or
stuff.
this one over here. So I think that's a little bit of an oversimplification. But what's most ironic about this is that it was a cybersecurity strategy or protocol that basically caused all of these issues. Just to offer a little more color, basically there's some coding that went out that is supposed to be able to predict or identify certain behaviors that hackers use, and then use the algorithm that's in place to say, hey, this looks funky. This is the type of thing that signifies an attack, sending that warning back to the user. There was bad code there.
Yeah.
And the thought is, if you read between the lines from a lot of different industry experts, is that some of that code was probably AI generated.
Oh.
So it
Ew.
kind of gets back to the point of how we're using AI in the right way. Okay. Because this is definitely a good application for it, writing these thousands and thousands of lines of code. But then how do we QA it? Or should we be using humans to write the AI and then having humans write the code and then AI QA it? Or how should we use this? Because that's sort of what is kind of anticipated as the issue here. What was also just as bad as all the outages is all of the different ways that the bad guys try to take advantage of it.
Yeah.
There's a number of phishing schemes that were launched in terms of links generated going to downloading malware that were getting people into these systems so that once they were fired back up, it was still there. So then you had to figure out a way to kick them out. Had a lot of different schemes that were going on in terms of stealing a lot of personal information or duplicating sites that were set up by CrowdStrike. So yeah, the bad guys definitely took advantage of this as well. One of the comments that was really interesting, this was sent to me by some of the different folks that we work with in covering cybersecurity. This one was from Jack Hittery. He's the CEO of Sandbox AQ, and he said, there's been an increasing trend to use AI to help developers write software code. This can indeed boost developer productivity, but where we need more help from AI is improving, like we're talking about, the quality assurance of the code. The major global outage that brought thousands of flights and businesses to a standstill reminds us that humans are not very good at catching errors in thousands of lines of code, and this is where AI can help a lot. So it's kind of interesting to hear that from a cybersecurity provider, basically identifying the fact that we can use AI, but maybe we're using it in the wrong spot right now.
Yeah, so that's what my initial response was. Well, you say this is a good example of how we could use AI, but it seems like we overly relied on AI and then it crashed all these systems.
Well, we don't know that for sure. Like
Okay.
you said, that's kind of reading between the lines in terms of who generated this code. At
Okay.
the end of the day, it came from CrowdStrike. Doesn't matter if it came from some algorithm that was generated by a machine or from an individual. We need to find a better way of QAing it before it gets out there. And that was his point in
Okay.
terms of basically saying maybe that's the better application for AI.
Okay, using it to QA. So for CrowdStrike, does it look the same if it's human generated or AI generated? Is one a better look, or is it no matter what, because they rolled this out and it was bad, it's going to be hard times for CrowdStrike for the...
Well, first of all, it's not going to be hard times for CrowdStrike.
Yeah.
They got it fixed in not as timely a fashion as we would like it, but timely enough to preserve their reputation and everything else. So it probably doesn't matter, quite honestly. And again, to say that people put all of their IT eggs in this one basket, not really fair. It's just, it was such a wide number and such a weird breadth of different applications that were sent down, or different industries, or whatever you want to say, that were taken out by it, that it looks bad.
I know. I think when you see, like, not only is Congress wanting to talk to CrowdStrike, but, you know, they're calling Delta Airlines out, you know, they're calling all the other people that were shut down just to kind of see, hey, how did you let this happen? I don't know. I think there might be more of an impact, but you're right. They did get things back online relatively quickly. Anna, what were your thoughts on it was surprising to me how quickly this happened, how much of a disruption it had, but unless it hit people directly, it didn't seem like a lot of people knew it was going on unless they were at the hospitals, at the airports, you know, unless it hit them, they had a firsthand account of it.
Yeah, I mean, and it was a weekend news cycle, really. It started on Friday, and then you kind of lost track of what was happening. And then by Monday, it was like Delta still in like a ton of trouble, right?
Yeah.
But a lot of the other companies had, you know, like you said, they responded quickly enough. To me, the concern more about all the eggs in the same IT basket was less about CrowdStrike and more, to me, about Microsoft, because you see how Microsoft is... You know, I wouldn't say the word monopoly because I don't think that is necessarily true, but they have hedged against that, like for many, many years, where they have faced a lot of cases over the years where they've been subject to investigations around antitrust to make sure that they're not the only game in town. But in a lot of ways, Microsoft Windows was at the root of this. And so they're, CrowdStrike is, their vendor, but no one has control over that. They just have control over their relationship with Microsoft, which everyone has that relationship, right? So I think that was a concern. There was a quote in this article from Ciaran Martin, who's a professor at Oxford University, and this is the kind of thing I think that keeps you up at night. He said, this is a very, very uncomfortable illustration of the fragility of the world's core internet infrastructure, which is like, woof.
Yeah.
He added that these without enough safeguards in place, that these things don't just go wrong; they go wrong at a huge scale. And I think that is a testament to the Microsoft component in this situation. So we talk about cybersecurity a lot, right? And how debilitating a breach can be, and that's not what this was, and the impacts were still just as catastrophic. And so to me, there was something to be said about the issue of technological diversity and backup systems and things like that, because, if you look at Microsoft specifically in the tech sector, they've been implicated in monopoly concerns over the years about tying products together. They were accused of basically killing their competitor, Netscape Navigator, many, many years ago because they gave their, browser software away for free. And they were like, well, we're just, this is what the market wants. But the conclusion of that was that they killed off a competitor, But I think people get fatigued by watching the level of scrutiny that takes place, not just in the tech sector, but we see it in manufacturing as well, of anti-monopoly investigations and antitrust stuff, and just making sure that deals are being broken up where it makes sense. And this is why they do that,
right.
Is because, and also I would say too, at Microsoft being such a big company, for a business that's trying to dig out from this, and the vendor is also trying to fix the issues of thousands and thousands of other customers. I mean, if you're Delta, they had to cancel, I think, 8,000 flights. They said the cost to them was like almost at $200 million by the beginning of this week, and it was still climbing. Mm-hmm. I don't think they probably appreciate just how many irons in the fire Microsoft has right now. They probably don't care. They're thinking like, we need to get back up and running and stop the bleeding. Those are some of the issues that you run into when you're dealing with a company that when something goes down, it's down for everybody.
Mm-hmm. It was wild that, Delta lost communication with its pilots, other staff, all of the passengers. Mm-hmm. It was a wild outage. And I think part of the problem is just how vulnerable we are and we feel as a result of something like this. I understand that the company said the problem involved a, quote, unexpected error in the content configuration update for its Falcon platform affecting Windows machines. Also, quote, a bug in the content validation system allowed problematic content data to be deployed to CrowdStrike's customers that triggered an unexpected exception that caused a Windows operating system crash. And when I read that, I was just like, but you got it, right? Because I think like to the layman, like I understand, Jeff, you're more of an expert in this field, but coming from the other perspective of this, it's just like, you have no idea. I think with a lot of this technology, I feel like our approach to regulation is also like, man, we really hope you got this, because it seems like a lot of them are kind of regulating themselves, and we just expect them to have everything ready to go, and then when something crashes, we're just like, we're looking for who to blame, but maybe we should blame ourselves for kind of putting too much on them. Therein
lies part of the issue here, and we talk about this a lot on the podcast and in the newsletter, OT Security Update, but there's a shared responsibility. Sometimes there is an inherent thought that when I implement new technology, whether it's on the plant floor or within the different networks, that because it's new technology, all that security stuff is just organically covered.
Yeah.
It's not.
Yeah.
That whole secure by design dynamic comes into play for what's new, but it doesn't go back in protecting the legacy systems that are in place. Mm-hmm. And part of that also comes into the fact that manufacturing in particular, a lot of industrial organizations, but not just industrial organizations, struggle with the whole idea of asset inventory and visibility throughout their network. They don't understand what they've got connected to what. And that's sort of one of the basic building blocks in developing a cybersecurity plan, is understanding what's all connected, what could all be attacked, and then going out and being proactive and putting together defensive, options or strategies. And a lot of that, you can see that coming in here. Delta should have had a pretty good idea in terms of what was going to happen if something like this took place, and had a response plan in place. Now, at this scale, it would have been difficult to have something that put a response that made everybody happy.
Yeah.
But they shouldn't have been panicked. They should have had an idea of what to do in this case.
Yeah. CrowdStrike, we had mentioned, says that most of the computers are back online and operational, and a more detailed explanation of what went wrong is coming. I just question, is anyone going to be able to understand the more detailed response? You know?
I think the response, they said it was that bug. And I think if you start overcomplicating it beyond the fact that we're trying to put out something that anticipates attacks, they put a bunch of data into an algorithm that spits out, here's the type of behaviors that signify an attack.
Yeah.
That's what's screwed up. I think people will feel better about it because it was at least coming from a good place. I mean, they were trying to do it right. So.
Yeah. It's, I get frustrated when we have a bug on one of our websites and it makes them lag a little bit. And it's just like, okay, maybe not that big of an issue. Not that big of an issue. All right. Our next most popular story. Aircraft prototype can now fly at unlimited speeds. Founded in 2017, Dawn Aerospace is a New Zealand-based company building a rocket-powered aircraft for supersonic flight. The company made a name for itself by supplying safe, accessible propellants and propulsion systems for a host of satellites that are currently in use. The Mk2 Aurora spaceplane is a demonstrator aircraft that combines the performance of a rocket with the quick turnaround of an aircraft. While Mk2 is a tech demonstrator, it's also going to be used as a suborbital vehicle for climate and scientific payloads. In the long term, Mk2 is going to inform the design of Dawn's Mk3, which the company is going to use as an orbital vehicle for launching satellites. Well, about 10 days ago, the company received a certificate from the Civil Aviation Authority to fly the Mk2 Aurora at unlimited speeds, including supersonic speeds up to 80,000 feet altitude. The Mk2 Aurora is a rocket-powered aircraft that could be the first vehicle ever to fly to the edge of space twice in a single day. The aircraft is designed to be rapidly reusable and low cost, making it well suited for high-speed flight research, Earth observation, and other defense and civil applications. At full performance, the Mk2 is going to fly faster and 2.5 times higher than any prior aircraft that takes off from the runway, including the SR-71 Blackbird, which is the current record holder. Jeff, this story, and many of them like it, made me question, is there a space bubble? When it comes to right now, everyone's hot on like the future of consumer space. And I feel like we're working on all these new ways to get satellites, other payloads into space. I mean, but there has to be a limit as to A, what goes into low Earth orbit, and B, what's truly usable.
Well, I guess that was the first thing that came to mind for me is, do we need to go to the edge space twice a day? I mean,
Two times a day.
What do we got going on up
Twice
there?
a-
Like,
yeah.
what's going on?
Cutting costs.
And you bring up the space tourism part, that's part of it.
Yeah.
But I think the bigger applications here are potentially for military use, payloads, satellite launches, all of that kind of stuff. It's interesting when you look at this, just the level of investment. Growing up, it was always NASA. What's NASA doing? This huge NASA budget. Using 2022 numbers, the last ones I could find that were comparable, NASA spent about, just to use round numbers, about $75 billion on space exploration.
Yeah.
The private sector, just in the U.S., was about 2.5 times that.
Wow.
So you can see there is this draw to investment and technology and development to get there, either from to enhance defense capabilities or for delivering payloads, satellites, whatever the case may be. We got a space station coming down, so we're probably going to put a new one up there to replace it.
Yeah.
So you could see some of this becoming more important if we ever want to colonize, I guess. This stuff seems really far out there to me. And when you're looking at the amount of money being spent there, I'm still trying to figure out if there is enough application to justify the amount of money that's going into it. I know everybody wants to be first. I get that.
Yeah.
But again, this is unmanned. They're not looking at taking people up in this thing right now.
Well,
I don't know.
That's what I was questioning. Like when you talk about the application, I feel like there are so many players right now racing for this not consumer, but the consumer space dollar. And like, there's only a finite amount of money out there that's going to be used, right? Like, it's still a lot.
Well, I think we get caught in whether it's this or some other technologies, autonomous vehicles. I don't know. You could roll out a number of different stuff that we talk about here. You never want to say no. You don't want to be the guy who's like, enough already, because maybe this is the one. Maybe, I think we're still defining how exactly we're going to use all this to its fullest extent.
Yeah.
And you don't want to say no to anybody who's trying to push the limit a little bit. But when you look at the dollars that are going into this, it does seem like we got other stuff we could fix too.
Yeah, it's very lucrative, very lucrative. And I think part of it is, if you can easily launch and get to the edge of space twice in a day, costs are going to come down. And I know that there are a lot of universities, other places in academia that would like to be able to get scientific payloads out to the edge of space a little bit cheaper. I mean, maybe it does open it up a little bit to other players in terms of what's achievable.
Yeah, it opens it up to like lawlessness. No, I just
lawlessness and space garbage.
First of all, I just want to say that what you guys have just laid out is totally a me argument. Like, because I'm usually the one that's like, boo, stop it. Nobody needs this stuff. We got other problems. Fix those first. But also, boo, nobody needs this stuff. We got other problems. We should fix that stuff first. I will say this. I think you guys are right in a lot of ways. I do think there are a lot of players in the market. And yes, like when we get our arms around space and what we're going to utilize it for, and if we can use it for scientific research that is going to solve diseases and speed up bringing pharmaceuticals to market, things like that are really have a big impact on humanity. Somebody wants to be there to catch all that business and be market ready when that time comes, I guess. Mm-hmm. So I guess that's, this is the space race, right? I do think that there will be a lot of companies that fall by the wayside as we move forward, as we've seen that with any emerging technology. We saw that with electric vehicles, for instance, all of the companies that are are kind of falling apart at the seams now as it gets more time, like prime time with that technology. But I will say that when it comes to Dawn, they have some kind of interesting competitive advantages that they lay out pretty well on their website. They're talking about how they really want to merge this world of rockets and planes to access space in a new way and scale that. And so they talk about, I thought their website was interesting because they're talking about they want a genuine revolution. That's the words they use on their site. And they're talking about their niche and how, you hear a lot in the industry about trying to create a more reusable rocket. Obviously, Elon Musk is doing this at SpaceX as well with some success. But what Dawn says, and I'm going to read directly from their site, they say, from our own experience, we know that there are some baked in fundamentals that we would always be battling against in reusability. The concept has many single points of failure and generally struggles to address a fundamental need for robustness to survive inevitable malfunctions we see in complex vehicles. A vehicle can only be as reusable as its average failure rate permits. Makes sense, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So then they go on to say that winged vehicles can land without functioning engines, the most notoriously unreliable part of just about any vehicle. So this is why they're using planes as like a hybrid with the rocket system. It says redundancy can be built into other key mechanisms, such as control surfaces with little cost performance, as is done on commercial aircraft. So that makes many of potential anomalies survivable, even significant ones, they say, which dramatically increases the robustness of the system, even if a mission were need to be aborted. So I think that's interesting premise to work from, considering that this is emerging and we've seen a lot of rockets blow up, right?
Yeah.
a lot. Mm-hmm. So,
and what's the answer? The reason that we typically hear is space is hard.
But it is hard. Yeah. So, obviously they think that they can build a better mousetrap here by integrating these two things into one and making sure that if something goes horribly wrong, which it does in testing, that these can come back and they can rework them and make them. So, maybe that will help them emerge from the pack. Whether the pack needs to exist at this funding level. Whether it needs to be as big as it is, I don't know about that. But I do think that they have an interesting business case.
No, I agree. And I'm sorry if it came off as like I was not as hot on the prospect of commercial space, because I think it's really cool. It's just that I feel like, as you said, like we've seen in EVs, we have so many players. And I mean, I think Dawn is a really exciting one that is seems more viable than others we've seen kind of cross our desk.
Yeah.
But it seems like a lot. It seems like a lot going into what is kind of a smaller market.
It's pricey. Yeah.
A very pricey smaller market. One thing that really stood out about Dawn too was this idea of electric versus chemical propulsion. So electric has made headway in the satellite industry. And Dawn talks about seeing this shift back to chemical propulsion that I really thought, I almost thought this part of the story could be in case you missed it. Because so electric propulsion systems have become popular over the last 10 years, mainly because they've lowered launch costs, right? But chemical propulsions are now about a 20th of what they were during the space shuttle era, and they continue to go down. So while electric propulsion still good for deep space, long duration missions because you can power it with solar arrays, chemical propulsion systems are winning out now for missions where revenue, responsivity, and responsibility take high priority. For example, satellites with chemical propulsion typically reach their operational orbit quickly, from mere hours to up to 3 days. Electric propulsion is slow. I mean, we're talking about hours to 3 days. Electric propulsion takes 90 days to get to orbit. According to Dawn, for a satellite that's making $20,000 of revenue per day, which I want a piece of that, that's $1.76 million in lost revenue. So I thought it was a really interesting and cool example of how, we've gone to these electric propulsion systems and maybe they are the future, but the realistic costs and capabilities of chemical propulsion has a lot of people going back to the way things used to be. Mm-hmm. Just kind of cool. Still, these chemical systems, they admit, have their disadvantages, concerns over handling and toxicity, inability to perform low thrust maneuvers. So there's a give and take with each of them. But it's kind of like, sometimes we're always on to what's next or on to the next. Every once in a while, it's like, well, actually, we have it pretty good back here. Would you just hang on to this and still use it?
So we need electric hybrid rocket ships.
Yeah.
Half chemical propulsion, half electric.
Yeah, because they talked about, with electric or with the chemical, they can't make adjustments or quick moves or stuff like that. It's all just kind of stop and go with rockets as opposed to.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you got a heck of a business plan for a new tech startup.
All I need is $100 billion.
I think we could do it for 50.
Start big.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Start the number high. Yeah. I don't know how this is done. Do you go in with the bigger number?
You're a worse negotiator than my daughter.
Agreed. I'm terrible. I'm horrible at it. The only there's me at a rummage sale, I wind up paying over sticker price because I go in and $1. You know what? It's 10 now. And you're just that sounds fair.
Wow.
Yeah. No, it's you don't want me at the negotiation table. Just fold. Sounds good to me.
Yeah. My youngest daughter, great negotiator, always jacked up the rates for yard work. Yeah. But I always tried to negotiate with the middle daughter because she was horrible at it.
Oh, okay.
So.
Oh, and they were negotiating
played them
collectively.
Off. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know. Your sister said this.
No, I just tried to close the deal quick before the younger one got in there.
Well, our next most popular story, a missed rock on a chart causes $1.4 million in damages to a barge. A tugboat and barge, operating together as an articulated tug and barge, also known as an ATB, last year ran aground near Marmot Bay off the coast of Alaska. The ATB hit a submerged rock while entering a cove and caused about $1.4 million in damages. An NTSB investigation into the accident determined it was caused by a misreading of the charts. The ATB captain plotted a route using the vessel's electronic chart system, also known as an ECS. As the ATB turned into the cove, it hit the submerged rock that the NTSB said was not detectable on radar or through a visual lookout. However, the rock was charted, but the captain failed to notice an asterisk marking in its location. Jeff, this almost seems like another take on like alarm fatigue. Like, is tool fatigue a real thing? Like, there's so many tools at your disposal that you miss something as simple as an asterisk. And also like an asterisk, I guess you should be trained to know, like, if you are the captain of a floating vessel, day one, asterisk on chart means rock.
Yeah. I mean, to your point, your initial point about tool fatigue, I think that is absolutely real. I agree with you 100% there. And I have to admit, even though I know the scale is completely different, anybody who's ever busted up a prop on a boat can really relate to this story. Like, don't you have the feeling like this guy got called, the pilot got called into the office, like, what happened? He's like, man, I have been going up and down this channel every day.
Yeah.
Like, I've done this 100 times. That rock was never there. Because that's what always happens when you bust a prop on a boat. Like, it's like, where did that come from? That was never an issue. So I do think tool fatigue is an issue. And I think one of the things I always think back to when I was in the military, for a while I was working with tracked vehicles. They were howitzers, basically. You'd look at it, you see it was a tank, it was a howitzer. It was on a track. And there were checklist after checklist that you would go through before you even left the motor pool, okay, that you would go through. And these guys, the cadre who were teaching us how to run these guns, they had done this probably literally tens of thousands of times. But every time they got out the checklist, everything was checked off and they went through every single thing. And that's hard to do. That is very difficult to do. So I can appreciate the fact that this captain, again, probably running something very familiar with, probably did skip through some of his procedures and checklists and utilizing a lot of these tools that are in place to prevent this very thing from happening. It's sort of human nature, not trying to dismiss the fact that he screwed up. Yeah. That's evident. That's obvious. But I think there is that constant battle between it's still a human being running these pieces of equipment. Yeah. They're going to make these types of mistakes. Thank goodness no one was hurt. Yeah. And that the damage was excluded to this boat.
Yeah. No pollution.
Right.
It is wild how many of these stories we do that come down to a checklist, right? That flashlight in the F-35 or whatever. Yeah. Like, there are so many things where because a box wasn't checked, Anna, there are millions of dollars in damages. And to Jeff's point, luckily, at least in this specific case, no one got hurt. Everyone just got like a lot of expensive egg on their face.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with a lot about what you said, Jeff. And I think that you're right, that this was an issue of something being overlooked. And there may be a few reasons behind that. Tool fatigue may be one of them. Just like, somebody who's been doing this for a long time and you get into their rhythm and they know what they're doing. And then one day it doesn't work exactly as planned. The other thing that I noticed in the article, they said in the NTSB report that one of the things that they also cited was, they said that the captain was not using all available navigational resources, including the Coast Pilot and the grounding avoidance features of the ECS when he planned the route. Mm-hmm. That said a lot to me as well, because, it sounds like some of the systems were in play that were necessary, and there were some that would have been very helpful that were not utilized in this case. Mm. It's hard to assign fault in this scenario, in my opinion, because it's easy to want to blame this veteran captain who maybe doesn't want to change or doesn't want to utilize the new systems. They've been doing it for a long time.
Are you going to go, like, maybe he was working too many hours? Is that where you're going?
No, I'm not. Okay. That's possible. I don't know. But it made me think of training and issues of new technology. So we hear about this in manufacturing all the time. We bought this technology. It's being underutilized. People have come up with their own workarounds. I would argue that the only reason that happens in manufacturing, in a boat, anywhere, is that the case isn't made upfront for what this technology can do. People aren't trained well enough. It's easier to not use it, and no one has given them a compelling enough reason to use it. We don't seriously think that this captain was like sailing around, casually risking running into a rock because he doesn't care. We know that's not true, right? Yeah. There's other available technology to use that could prevent this, and he just doesn't care. Like, I think maybe if the technology's there and no one says, like, hey, here's what I can do, here's how we're going to integrate it into our operating procedures, and this is how we're going to check that everyone's using it, and this is why you need to use it. Mm-hmm. I think in manufacturing it's the same. There's so often tech paralysis that comes with these new systems, and not using them just introduces more risk. And then it also, I think, discourages management from making future investments in cutting edge technology because they're like, well, the last one didn't work.
Yeah.
Nobody used it. And so, if they get burned in the past, then that kind of screws everybody going forward. And so I think it's, in cases like these, it's as easy as like calling your vendor or hiring a consultant and figuring out like why it's not being used. Use that information to help tailor a solution. But if the technology is there, of course it's on the boat captain, but it's also on like the overarching policies and procedures, the management group, figuring out like why it's not being utilized, knowing it's not being utilized, figuring that out.
No, and one of the things that I really like, but I mean, who's at fault? It's got to be, at the end of the day, it's got to be the captain, right?
Well, I think
even at a base level, like he didn't use all those other tools, but there was that asterisk.
Sure, but we don't know what an asterisk looks like on whatever he's looking at. It may be
probably
very
looks like a tiny little star shape.
It may be very small. People make mistakes.
We need to know the size of this asterisk.
I want to see it.
I want to know the contrast on the page. Was this a glossy page? Was there perhaps a glare from the sun?
I think that, of course, if he was behind the wheel, yes, blame can be assigned there. But at the same time, like if there's all this technology that's there that's not being used, he's not the only person who should bear the burden of why or why not that's happening. Like we told him to use it, and after that, we don't know anything more about it. Like, no, other people should be like monitoring this and figuring out like, hey, well, it's not being used. Let's figure out why and how to make sure that it is.
Well, and the NTSB agrees with you completely. One thing that I really enjoy about the NTSB, outside of their very well written and elegant reports that are very entertaining to read, they always give like lessons learned, right? First sentence of lessons learned: owners and operators should ensure their crews are sufficiently trained in the use of the electronic chart system, or ECS, and understand how to use the different functionalities of the ECS.
I didn't even read this part.
No, that's why I was just like, this is beautiful. Like, Anna and the NTSB perfectly in line, Jeff.
BFFs.
Impressive.
Yeah. They say an ECS can provide a wealth of navigation information to mariners and can display the same features differently depending on user settings and entered vessel characteristics. So the tools are there, as you said. Make sure everybody knows how to use them.
Yeah.
And I think that while sometimes we do these like maritime stories that are a little outside of the manufacturing box, like I think this one has a direct translation to manufacturing settings. And I also thought I was completely like just having a play on words when I went from alarm fatigue to tool fatigue. And then I'm like, you know what? I bet tool fatigue is a real thing. And so tool fatigue is apparently a very common problem in the modern workplace, especially with so many tools and systems available that tracking them all can become overwhelming, leading to burnout, confusion, decreased productivity, and engagement. So experts say that teams need a structure for the evaluation and use of tools. It's possible to have the best of both worlds here. So one where you're not being overwhelmed by the tools, and at the same time, you're staying up to date on new technologies. So just a couple of tips. Delegate ownership of the tools. I think that's one thing we hear about all the time, is there isn't like a tool champion, for lack of a better term. Do your homework. And sometimes when it comes to tools, less is more.
Yeah.
Tool fatigue, real thing.
All right.
Did you know that?
I hadn't heard
figured?
that. I hadn't heard those two terms put together, David.
Yeah.
You did a great job. You, Anna, and the NTSB deserve so much credit for your elegance and wordsmanship.
I'm reading between the lines, Jeff. Reading between the lines. No, I was just so excited. I'm like, I may have done it. I may have coined a buzzword taken. No jargon. No new jargon today. All right. Next most popular story. John Deere ends support of, quote, social or cultural awareness events. John Deere recently became the latest major U.S. company to distance itself from diversity and inclusion measures. The company was recently targeted by conservative backlash. So, in an X post, John Deere said it would audit all training materials, quote, to ensure the absence of socially motivated messages in compliance with federal and local laws. The company also said, quote, the existence of diversity quotas and pronoun identification have never been and are not company policy. However, the company does still plan to, quote, track in advance company diversity. The move comes just a few weeks after Tractor Supply shuttered corporate diversity and climate efforts after being targeted by conservative activists opposed to diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. In response, President of the National Black Farmers Association, John Boyd Jr., called for the resignation of Deere & Company CEO John C. May and a boycott of the company. He asked for that last Wednesday. The association also noted that the switch comes about a month after the company agreed to pay $1.1 million in back wages and interest to 277 Black and Hispanic job applicants for alleged hiring discrimination. Jeff, can you find anything constructive in this war on wokeness?
Okay. So, on this podcast, we offer our opinions and our thoughts on all these different stories and topics and everything else. And I would say 98% of the time, it stems from data, personal experiences, our experience in the industry, something that we're drawing from there that goes beyond just personal opinion. Mm-hmm. So I'm guessing I'm going to warn anybody listening right now, if you don't want to hear personal opinion, this is maybe fast forward a couple minutes, because that's all I can draw from here. Yeah. There's no data to point to a right or wrong, because guess what? There's no right or wrong here. Yep. And I hate the term woke, because the people who use that term are wrong, and the people who rally against it don't understand it either. Mm-hmm. So it's very, very frustrating. To call this a war of any sorts is also ridiculous. That's the Starbucks term, right? The guy who has been rallying against these types of things. If you're John Deere, why do you issue a press release about this? Why do you go out of your way to say something about this? Mm-hmm. Because everybody who comes out talking about these DE&I initiatives says it's not a political topic, and then they proceed to over politicize it to a point where it creates this huge divisiveness, which goes counter to what everybody wants, which is just to be better. Mm-hmm. There is nobody arguing the fact that we don't want to be better at this. I don't agree with work quotas. I don't agree with hiring people based solely on their ethnicity, sexual orientation, anything else. No, hire the best person. Mm-hmm. That's all we want to do. But in order to do that, we do need to raise levels of awareness, not action, awareness. Because when we make companies smarter to the fact that you're missing out on talent and that's going to put you behind, that's how we usher in change. Mm-hmm. As soon as you tell anybody, especially somebody who runs or owns a business, you got to do this thing, they're not going to want to do that thing just on principle. Mm-hmm. So making all these things mandatory doesn't work. But when you also go the other way and you refuse to acknowledge the fact that they can be beneficial, you're also creating a problem. Yeah. The high ground here is the middle. Mm-hmm. We accept the ability that we need to be more aware and inclusive without enforcing mandates or actions. And by doing so, we're serving everyone better, because that way nobody's being questioned on why or how they were hired. Nobody's being forced to do something just because somebody else is telling them they have to. Mm-hmm. These things are so frustrating because, again, you've got people arguing different sides of the exact same coin, and nobody wins in the process. Yeah. John Deere needs to focus on making tractors and lawnmowers, mm-hmm. not their inclusionary practices. And they certainly don't need to go out of their way to inflame or ignite controversy on what they're doing. All they need to do is say, you know what? We're going to be better.
We're trying to do better. No, I agree with you. That's one thing that was the most shocking about this story, is that John Deere came out and said, this is what we're changing, because it's such a flashpoint that the one side, it's not going to seem like enough, and the other, it's going to seem like going backwards. So I agree with you. Just at some point, just say, hey, we're trying to do better going forward. Yeah. And, don't invite further controversy. One question I wanted to ask, Anna, is this war on wokeness, is that a natural response to what people are calling virtue signaling?
I object to the term wokeness in many ways. I mean, it's just exhausting. It's been utilized, again, if we're talking about flashpoints, and virtue signaling, it's been weaponized. I don't think was ever the intention. I think people were, again, looking for encouraging folks to be to be better, as Jeff was saying, and to look at things in a stark light of how they are, that there are people who have been marginalized historically, and companies need to do a better job of ensuring that those people have opportunities. I do think that there is, each company has a job to do when it comes to making sure that that is a systematic approach that they can take, that they're not leaving this in the hands of managers who maybe don't think moms can work hard enough in the workplace, so don't really want to hire them, or whatever it is, whatever your reason, leaving those to the hands of individuals can be very problematic. So to me, it is important that companies take a look and try to figure out, like, are we doing this effectively to make sure that we can facilitate a policy that, allows us to be hiring the best people for the job, no matter who their background or who they are. That's not always taking place today. So I understand why businesses are being asked to look at this more closely. To me, I have a lot of the same issues as you guys do with, to me, like, this was its own socially motivated message that Deere sent by just making this post. And to me, it felt like they're bowing from pressure from just a few online people, which felt kind of sad to me. It just felt like you're this multi-billion-dollar company, and you're so rattled by a few people on Twitter giving you a hard time. Like, you're afraid you're going to get yelled at or something. Like,
It's crazy that a company like a John Deere can get shook by a couple of rabble-rousers on X.
I agree. I thought, and this thing with Tractor Supply, and we're not going to have any initiatives involving climate change. Like, what are you doing? If you look at the data around that, this is according to Yale, 72% of Americans surveyed believe global warming is happening, and 69% of Americans believe that corporations should do more about it. So
wait, that's really political, right? That is super divisive, right?
Could we please get a trigger warning first, Anna?
Right. Let's walk away from that. It's not good for our brand. It just makes me feel like you're so afraid of being criticized that, and it's just by a few people, that it's just hard to believe that John Deere is actually losing business over any of these initiatives. I don't think that they are.
Not. That's what's so ridiculous. I'm sorry.
No, I mean, we agree. We
should agree louder, though.
It just felt like sort of pathetic to me, honestly. And then, lastly, this quote from Starbuck, the ringleader here. He said that, quote, people should go to work without having to feel like they have to behave a certain way in order to be acceptable to their employer.
That's not how business works.
All right, it's pajama day every day forever. But speaking of John Deere in the context of being a workplace, going out of your way to make it clear that you're not in support of any of these types of initiatives. In fact, vehemently so, you're going to recalibrate to remove them completely from your operation. I think that sends its own message. And to your point, there's a huge talent pool out there, and companies are clamoring to get the right people in the door. And there's a lot of people that are going to look at that and say, this is not a company that I want to share my talent with. And that's going to be the natural consequence of stuff like this, which I feel like was unnecessary to begin with.
I recently had a conversation with Jabron Washington. He's the head of Ethos Cannabis. I thought he had some really cool inclusion initiatives, which he say are vital for him. But he's more philosophical when it comes to that, where he asks employees to live life and work in a way that is gracious, humble, and gives everyone a place where they can be their truest self. And to me, when you hear stuff like that, it sounds so common sense, right? Cultivate a place of work where you can feel comfortable, where you can feel like you can be yourself, and where you feel like you can thrive. And I don't see why anyone else would think the other way, I understand that there are hardliners like my way or the highway, but I don't understand how that is constructive.
But that comes down to a procedural dynamic in terms of how you do your job, okay? Not who you are when you're not at your job, or factors that don't relate to your ability to do the job. That's what's frustrating here, is trying to bring in all of those different parameters to something that should be irrelevant.
Another thing that I wanted to pull out of this article was from Jen Stark. She's the co-director of the Center for Business and Social Justice at BSR, which is a consultancy. She says that this is the new normal, like companies like John Deere limping between these flashpoints. And I think it's just best to stay out of the fray. I mean, this is like...
They don't need to be flashpoints. They're only flashpoints if you make them such.
Yeah. But I mean, agreed. But it's like, I think, as we've said, there's something to be said about quietly leading by example.
Sure.
Without, going out on X and knowing that as soon as you hit post, you're going to fire up one side and still not make the other side that happy. Yeah. Like, I don't know, companies across industries are like bracing for the prospects of potential changes in terms of federal contracts that have also historically been a powerful way to promote equity in the workplace. It's going to be interesting to see how that changes things. Joe is back. He said he's glad to catch the podcast live. It's good to see you, Joe. Good to have you back. The other thing was, did you see how like the leading HR organization is dropping the word equity?
Yeah.
I was just like, okay, of all the ones that I thought would actually like make a change, I didn't think it would be the Society for Human Resource Management. That was a wild.
How is equity such an inflammatory word?
Yeah.
I mean,
also, how can you say it's going to drop? You're going to drop the word equity from your diversity and inclusion approach, but still remain committed to advancing it? Like the sheer nature of that move says that you are not committed to it. Anyway, I feel like, you're right. This was a bit of a heated topic.
Yeah.
And take that collective breath.
You have permission to move to the next story.
Okay, that's good because the other bullet point that I have is just going to keep us going. Let's do this one for Joe. All right. GM's weird robot. It's a segue. The most popular story this week. GM's weird robot taxi is going on the shelf. In 2017, General Motors paid nearly $1 billion for autonomous driving startup Cruise. At the time, the company had grand plans for self-driving taxis. Well, this week, GM CEO Mary Barra told shareholders that the company's autonomous driving segment was simplifying its path to scale by focusing on the next generation of the Chevy Bolt instead of the Origin. The Origin is, or was, a 6-person driverless shuttle bus that debuted in 2020. The Origin was meant to be a new mode of transportation, a conversion van with sliding doors, seating for 6 passengers, no steering wheel, no pedal, no rearview mirror, and no windshield wipers. But it turns out that the Origin may have been ahead of its time, and the vehicle is being scrapped, or at least shelved indefinitely. Anna, was the Origin a lose-lose idea for Cruise?
So much rhyming.
Wow. Did you plan that one?
No, that one's just top of my head.
Good work.
All right.
Enough already.
I will say that at the risk of being accused of editorializing by putting the word weird in this headline, weird is a fact in this case.
I think you can say you could lose half of those things and it's still a weird car, It's
a little bit weird. It has a lot of features that I think just the world is not ready for, or lacks a lot of features, I guess I should say, that the world is not ready for. I think that this story in many ways just speaks to consumer readiness, lack thereof. Here's the way I see it. What is the biggest application for autonomous vehicles right now? Robotaxis, right? That's the only way it's being used at the time. And the robotaxi market, I think, doesn't have a great big need for 6-person shuttles. While Origin could be used for that, it's a big vehicle. It's expensive to make. It's on its own unique platform. So why produce at great expense something that is not really what your core customer needs at this time? Who would need shuttles like this? Places like airports, hotels, big convention centers, things like that. They don't want to buy these things because the technology is not ready. Like nobody wants to invest hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars into like buying a fleet of these vehicles that they're going to see,
Like mow over half the trade show.
Right. Just there's going to be so much rework that has to be done on them. They're still proving them out. They're not ready for what they are intended for, and they don't make sense for what is ready, which is sort of this like ad hoc ride sharing type, consumer use of a Robotaxi. And people will use that because it's like, well, I'll hop in one of these for $15 and give it a try, whatever. Then GM carries all the costs of having those vehicles. They're not trying to sell them to anyone. They're just trying to work out the QA and make a little money, I guess, on fares. That's probably negligible, right? But the point is that GM then is on the hook when the tech needs rework or there's challenges or whatever. It's a much more practical approach to the market, I think. And then you just don't, I don't know. I just don't see right now this weird van shuttle hybrid with like nothing in it. There's even like a hotel or an airport. They're not ready for this. I don't think they want this.
Well, no, I think you also think about like Disney World, Disneyland, like attractions where, you maybe have larger families that might need to be shuttled around. But again, when you're still proving out the technology and like the car maybe accidentally drags a pedestrian for 60 feet last October.
Yeah, you're going to like hit a kid at Disneyland and then see how that goes.
That's a hard sell. I mean, you know what? If it was a trade show, at least that makes your booth the most popular. Just like, oh, this is where the Origin crashed into your CNC machine. Cool. It was like the hottest thing at IMTS this year. Jeff, what are your thoughts on, do you see this as a good move for GM that has kind of been sinking a lot of resources into Cruise, and maybe this was a lose-lose scenario for him?
I do think it's a good move. Okay, I think the Origin was a big swing.
Yeah,
to be honest, with a lot of stuff that was going on there, I think Ben put this story together. Correct.
Yeah.
He talked about maybe being a little bit ahead of its time. That could be it. I think it could also be a little bit of the fact that these were technologies where they were looking for an application to sort of implement the technology. So, yeah, it wasn't a great fit. So I think it makes sense. However, I wouldn't fault them for trying to pursue this and trying to be different. I think if this is what you want from sort of these bigger companies, to push the limits a little bit more. So can't fault them for that, but I do think it is a good move, especially when you look at sort of the leaders right now in autonomous vehicle technology. They're software companies. It's Google, it's Microsoft, it's a company named Mobileye is doing a lot of stuff. Tesla as well. I guess they're kind of, bridging between the two, software and automotive. But so this makes sense. And what it really reminds me of is a lot of things that are going on in pharmaceuticals right now. The big drug companies aren't developing new drugs. They're letting the smaller companies, the private contractors, do all the legwork, sort of improving the science. Then they swoop in and buy them and bring the drug into their fold. Yeah. So from a cost perspective and really from a development timeline perspective, it makes a lot of sense. This allows GM to put more resources, I would think, into stuff like electric vehicles. Just off the top of my head, maybe one thing. So I do think it's a good move. I think there's a model there, again, from pharmaceuticals that sort of plays out and could serve them well. And I think it was a good move. The one thing I was thinking about too, and reading this article or watching the video, we talk about autonomous vehicles, and they're thinking tier 5, fully autonomous by like 2030, 2035, something like that. Everyday use. Are you going to use that? Because personally, I like to drive. Like if I'm in the vehicle, I would rather drive than ride. So even if I have this option, I'm still going to want to drive the vehicle.
Yeah. We might be the last generation that feels that way, though. Like, and there are certain circumstances where, when I had it up to northern Minnesota and there were no good flights and there was no good drive, and you could just be like, I got to jump in an Origin for 9 hours and, not have to drive. Like maybe that. But I do think that we might be the last generation that thinks that way.
Do you think that's just because they're not going to be exposed to operating their own vehicle, or just societal change? I think it's a societal change because I see how many people in their 20s right now are just unmotivated to get a car or to drive already. And I could definitely see that paving a way for this being the way forward, when in like 20 years, when they realize level 5 and we're still out there like battling autonomous cars on the Beltline, and they're like in their 6-seater Origin, just like, move, old man, get that Nissan out of my way. But
Also, isn't one of the things about this story just what happens when you acquire a company, right? Like, it's not like you acquire part of the company, you acquire the whole thing. And sometimes they have projects that just don't fit the roadmap, right? And I mean, it's not without throwing a lot of resources at them, right? So 2 years ago, the company poured another $3.5 billion into Cruise. In the last quarter, they lost $1.14 or $1.14 billion in terms of an operating loss. So, they might have to be trimming a few things here and there. We all the time we talk about what might happen when these startups get in trouble or go under. Anna, to me, this kind of seemed like what a lifeline might look like, whereas like GM bought Cruise, but then it's been problematic for GM. I don't know. It made me think of when we look at these startups and we think, oh man, if only they had the backing of like a GM or a VW. And it's just like, okay, well, no matter what, if they did, it's still not going to be smooth sailing.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, our next most popular story isn't a thing. Oh, wait. Joe S. agrees with us. He says driving is changing, and it's sad.
Sad.
Yeah, agreed. We can all shake our fists together. But before we jump into, in case you missed it, we have another word from our two sponsors, Big Commerce and Data Extreme. Hi, I'm David Mantia, and with me today is Chris Harrington. We're talking about the future of B2B e-commerce for manufacturers. Chris, does anyone ever want to call you about the price of an O-ring?
They never want to. Unfortunately, often they have to because, many of our manufacturing friends out there do not have an e-commerce presence yet to make it easy for customers to go and make those repeat purchases or simply get the price and availability for that O-ring and get it ordered so that they can finish the job that they're working on over the weekend, right? So, yeah, our customers don't want relationships with us for the price of an O-ring. Let's have the great conversations with our customers on the important tasks and leave the tasks that can make our customers more productive and our own employees more productive. Let's leave that for our online tools.
Let's leave it for the tools, and let's talk about it a little bit more in great detail. July 30th, please join us for the future of B2B e-commerce for manufacturers. Register below. We'll see you there. Hey, we're back. This episode is brought to you by Big Commerce and Data Extreme. Manufacturers are quickly discovering that e-commerce is no longer a capability that is just, quote, nice to have. Rather, it has become mission critical for those wanting to stay competitive on a global level. So, we got together a crack team of e-commerce experts to provide guidance and real-world solutions. Register right now to join us for the future of B2B e-commerce for manufacturers. We're going live on July 30th, but if you register, we'll also make sure you get it in demand. And it's not just going to be myself and Chris Harrington, but Kurt Anderson, Jessica Williamson, and Nicole Donnelly. Just an incredible panel of experts. You don't want to miss that one. Now, things that you did miss. In case you missed it, stories, definitely not popular on the website this week, but could make a big impact on the industry going forward. Jeff, what do you have for in case you missed it this week?
Yeah, so I picked a story. We talked a little bit about cybersecurity to start, and I thought this one was really interesting for a couple different reasons. But it's about cybersecurity startup Wiz rejecting Google's offer for acquisition. Now, what made it interesting is that it was worth a reported $23 billion, and Wiz said most. So this would have been the most in Google's history that they would have paid for an acquisition. This is, just to offer a little perspective, this is a 4-year-old company. And they said no. They've got an IPO coming up, so they're banking on that to bring in more money. According to their CEO, Asef Rappaport, he said saying no to such humbling offers is tough, but that the company is instead focused on its next milestones, which include going public and reaching $1 billion in annual recurring revenue. This is a company, one of the reasons that there's so much buzz around Wiz, and that I personally thought it was great that they did not go through with the acquisition with Google, is that they're really focused around protecting personal data and information. So when you think about the biggest data company in the world potentially acquiring them, man, that would have been very interesting in terms of basically having the company that you're trying to protect your data from, also offering the security platform to secure and protect your data.
That's the wolf at your door.
Yeah. So I think this was sort of it's not, maybe down the road this could still happen, obviously. But for right now, anyways, it looks like this huge cybersecurity platform is going to remain independent, if you will, which is good news, I think, for everybody. I think it also will be interesting to see what happens because there's a ton of cybersecurity offerings out there right now. You're talking about like tool fatigue. That is a huge issue right now in cybersecurity, especially for OT and ICS cybersecurity. There's so many different products out there. I think you're going to see Google going after a lot of them now that they've got, like $20 billion that they're not throwing at one of them.
Yeah.
So you could see Google, I think, having a big inroads into a lot of different areas. Again, industrial cybersecurity is the most heavily targeted sector. It is the one with the highest ransomware payouts. It is the one that has the most downtime issues when it comes to all these attacks. Yeah, I could definitely see Google knocking at the door of a lot of manufacturers and looking to basically buy the cybersecurity tools that they're currently using and becoming more embedded within those systems. That is a lot of data flying around.
I forget again. What does OT and ICS stand for?
So operational technology. So that's all the stuff we talk about on the plant floor and the industrial control systems that are running them. So there's all those connection points controlling all of that data, going to a lot of different places. The hackers have figured out how to get in. Again, ton of tools out there that I think you're going to see Google get real interested in.
So how do you say no to $23 billion? Do you
Probably
say
when
no?
you have an IPO that's going to go for like 40.
Okay, that's what I was going to say. Is it like, do you say no to $23 billion because you think you're worth $100 billion?
Well, when you're approaching $1 billion in annual revenues right now, yeah, I think you do. Oh man, crazy.
Anna, someone walks up to you, puts down that napkin, and that napkin says $23 billion. How do you take that napkin and then light it on fire, and say no to that?
Yeah, you don't. I don't know.
It's just, that is.
I'm impressed too. Like and it's a startup, so probably like young talent, and they're just like doing their thing. That's pretty awesome.
Mm-hmm. Just
good job, guys.
Good
job, Wiz.
I mean, it's incredible. Like, I can't even understand that scale because you said what they've been to get. It's a 4-year-old company.
4-year-old company.
4 years and a 23. I mean, essentially, that's what they're valued at now, right? Because that's what they were offered. Like, so they're
probably not valued at that much right now. I mean, I would think that exceeds what they're valued at.
Yeah.
But value's tough because it's basically, basically Google just set the valuation.
Yeah.
Right? So they did them a huge favor with their IPO here coming out.
That is, it's incredible. I thought this was a cool story too, and it's just when you think they're the biggest player anywhere. And someone can still say no to them. I don't know. It feels a little hopeful. Just like,
good point.
You can't have everything.
Yeah,
absolutely. And I think Wiz may have done the world a favor here by saying no.
Yeah. Just, you know what? They're like X and 1 now. Like, all right. Anna, what do you have for us? And in case you missed it this week.
I picked a story with a headline that I found intriguing when I saw it. It says manufacturing workers found to be among the most satisfied with their jobs. Okay. I was like, oh, what is this? So this was an interesting story because these rankings were developed by a firm called tollfreeforwarding.com.
Yeah.
Which is not exactly Reuters Ipsos. So just take that with a grain of salt.
Mm-hmm.
It seemed very clearly just like a play to get some marketing or some SEO or something by this company. But anyway, the good news is that this survey was not actually based on polling data. What they did was they researched online review data for 200 companies across industries and ranked them based on criteria including culture and values, diversity, inclusion, work-life balance, compensation, career opportunities, and senior management satisfaction. And so this is really just more of an accumulation of anecdotal data, which I did find actually to be kind of interesting because people I think are pretty candid in those types of reviews online, right? So, I did find it interesting. So the construction industry workers were deemed most satisfied, and they pegged that on potentially at least skyrocketing wages in the last couple of years, as well as really good job security. Manufacturing took third, but notably ranked second highest in all categories, in the categories for work-life balance, which I think is an underrepresented value of working in manufacturing.
Yeah.
People can kind of stick to their 40 hours and then if they want to work more, they get paid more in many cases. So, that's a benefit.
Yeah.
And then manufacturing also earned high marks in compensation and opportunity. So I think even as a thought exercise here, I thought the data was interesting, and it's a good example of some of the reasons people are drawn to this field and maybe why some more people should consider it.
Did you see what manufacturing was also first in? Diversity and inclusion.
Oh, good. Okay.
It was just like,
Yeah.
I thought it was, again, same grain of salt, where I was just, okay, tolls-free messaging, whatever you are.com.
Tollfreeforwarding.com. You can buy phone numbers.
Very good.
Yeah.
But I thought, you're right, there are a lot of myths out there about manufacturing.
For sure.
And I'd be interested to see how they pulled this data. Did they just grab everything from Glassdoor or Indeed? Because, when you go through those, you can tell the reviews that are definitely done by the HR representative.
I bet it was AI, honestly. Like,
Yeah.
if you're trying to find, cumulative trends, and it's probably a keyword game in there, right?
Yeah, they just scrubbed it.
Yeah.
But, either way, this is kind of encouraging to see just in terms of how manufacturing performed. I think that if you told most people in the manufacturing industry that it ranks second in work-life balance, that a lot of people, it would make them think twice.
Mm-hmm.
Jeff, what were your thoughts on this story? And not necessarily the source it came from, but some of the figures that it shared.
Well, putting the name of the source aside, it's good data. You can't argue with that. And I would agree with kind of a lot of things you were just saying there. This is the type of stuff we need to promote and get out there so people do realize this. Again, all of those weird stereotypes and stigmas attached to the industrial sector, they're not really that accurate. So putting this type of information out there from whomever it is, who cares? It's out there in the ether for people to find, and it's good promotional stuff to use in job ads, in promoting your business, in whatever it is. If you're Chamber of Commerce, local community, all that kind of stuff. Put this stuff out there so that people realize that this is a competitive place to have a career.
Least surprising thing about this, retail's at the bottom.
Retail will forever
Retail's
be
tough.
at the bottom.
It's just
We've all done it, and it's a tough gig.
Yeah, it's it's one thing that when you're out at the bar, you can always talk to people about, like when you either worked in like retail, food service, or both, and then there's the collective sigh, and then you share the war stories, just like Jeff dropping the bird seed, or or just anyone dealing with that one customer in particular, where we've all been there. We've all been there. And retail clearly hasn't done anything to scrape itself off the bottom. See, I saw that it was retail and e-commerce too. Does that mean, like, would you put, do you think Amazon's in e-commerce? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that one could use some help too. All right. For mine, in case you missed it, I grabbed this story about Airbus and its racer demonstrator shattering its speed goals.
You can't, in one fast plane story, it was not enough for you.
It wasn't enough for me.
Okay.
Because this was an even faster plane.
All right.
Well, now it's faster, but obviously the other one's going to go way faster. So 2 months ago, Airbus unveiled the Racer, which is this new $217 million tech demonstrator that is succeeding the company's now retired X-3 concept aircraft. Then, on June 21st, 2024, less than 2 months after its first flight, and after just 7 flights and about 9 hours of flight testing, the Airbus Racer reached nearly 261 miles per hour, exceeding its objective, which is 253 miles per hour. So it shattered that record, or that objective, by 8 miles per hour, but just shattered it dead. Shattered it. Less than 2 months after its first flight. That is speed and development timelines that are shrinking. That is the biggest thing that stood out to me, was like, I couldn't believe when this, typically when they unveil a demonstrator aircraft like this, you wait months, you wait a year to see what they're doing. If anything, you get a couple of updates as to what kind of exciting new control systems going in, or like features here and there that they're going to test. But the fact that this did it in less than 2 months is just incredible to me, and just shows like how these new design tools that are out there are just speeding development. Now, granted, The racer was developed as part of the European Research Clean Sky 2 project. So, it was 40 partners working across 13 European countries. I just got to stop.
Get there.
You'll get there. I'm just going to hide under here and just you guys finish it for me. Just wrap it up. 40 partners, 13 European countries working together. It's still an incredible achievement. Just a couple of facts about this aircraft. The racer is supposed to have a cruise speed of more than 250 miles per hour. Civilian helicopters cruising speeds typically range from 110 to 160, so far superior. Military choppers average around 200 miles per hour. Airbus says that the racer's got a unique engine and aerodynamic optimization that could realize a fuel consumption reduction of around 20% compared to current helicopters in the same weight category. Also, something that's really cool, it has a hybrid electrical eco mode system that was developed by Safran Helicopter Engines that allows one of the two engines to just stop while it's cruising, like mid-flight. Just like, you know what? Regatta from here. Shut her down. This is exciting to me because one day the racer or its successors, we're going to see this thing in emergency medical services, search and rescue operations, commercial transportation. We're going to see it in military and defense applications. And again, what they have achieved with such a team in just 2 months. Anna, to me, that just, it kind of blew my mind a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. And my first thought, too, was that emergency medical service application. I mean, you think about MedFlight and, they're running organs on ice. It's a race against time. People that are in very, very critical condition need to get to the hospital now. The difference in miles per hour, which is 50 miles per hour difference than the fastest military chopper, that's pretty incredible. So hopefully this will be put to good use.
No, I thought it was, I just think it's a cool initiative, right? Jeff, what were your thoughts on the racer?
250 miles an hour in a helicopter is terrifying.
Are you gonna get the pukes in there, do you think?
Man, that would be a wild ride. I mean, just some of those, nothing anything close to that, obviously. I can't even imagine. But yeah, all the applications you said is really incredible, and the development time too. And when they talk about all those partners, that's great to have all those resources, but you can also have that too many cooks in the kitchen type of thing happening as well. So to work through whatever egos were involved or all the different thought processes in getting this done speaks a lot to Airbus. I mean, they have been on fire lately. There's been a lot of good stuff going on there. Whereas Boeing, their biggest competitor, has had other issues to deal with. So
on fire in a bad way.
Yeah, in a different way.
Just literally on fire. So Jeff, when we first got into this industry and we first started covering design engineering, right? What were the two hottest topics all the time?
Mil-Aero.
Well, Mil-Aero, and for design engineers specifically, time to market and cost controls, right? And I always remember talking about okay, at some point you're going to still need X amount of time to make it, right? At some point it's still going to cost, X amount, but it is incredible how quickly these are being turned around and the kind of savings that they're realizing just using new digital tools. It blowing my mind. 15 years ago, if you would have said this is possible, I guess I would have been really cool, but maybe push back a little bit. All right, well, let's move on to our final thoughts before we get out of here this week. Anna, what's your final thought this week?
I just wanted to share that earlier this week I made a phone call to the Great Wolf Lodge because I'm trying to set up a long weekend so we can take our kids to the Great Wolf Lodge in the fall. And I just want to say that the people on the phone are wonderful there and they're very kind. And if anyone from their management team or corporate is listening to this, you can let them stop saying have a wolf-tastic day because it is so demoralizing. I just cringe hearing it, and the person on the other end is
you can hear their soul breaking.
Yeah, they're just.
Have
we're
a wolf-tastic day.
We're all adults. You're not talking to a 7-year-old on the phone. We can just talk. It was just a transaction. You don't have to say any of that. So that is not necessary. And I just felt kind of bad for the multiple people that I spoke with that told me multiple times to have a wolf-tastic day. Yeah. I did have one So it was effective, but I don't think that they need to do it.
So should they switch it from like have a wolf-tastic day to just at the end of the conversation they have to howl?
Yeah, there is like a recorded howl when you call.
No.
It's not the person that you're talking to, but there is like a "Aroo" when like, welcome to the Great Wolf Lodge. Like, there's a lot happening there.
I'm glad we saved that soundbite, so we're going to use that again.
Yeah.
Anna howling like a wolf.
We're going to sign off the Today Manufacturing Podcast with a howl, I think, at the end of
Anna
everyone.
will now be known as the lone wolf.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Well, I hope you have a wolf-tastic day. It does. It is hard to say with like any kind of sincerity.
No, it's not cool.
Yeah. My final thought this week is that my wife and I recently fell into a free weekend. So we had another family member that was just like, I haven't seen the boys in a long time and I want to take them. And I was just like, okay, you can have them. But normally that means they want them for like 3.5 to 4 hours on a Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
And it's got to be like, they got to be there by 10 and they got to be out by 2, you know? And so we were just like working through the details and it was like, you know what about an overnight? And so it went from like Saturday to Sunday. And it's like, you know what? I'm not working this summer. So what if I picked up the boys like Friday morning and then you got them back Sunday night? And it was just like, what do you mean?
Whoa.
Like, what do you mean? And then like, there's the excitement, just like, oh my God, 3 days? Like, and then there was like this crippling decision-making process where it was like, what are we going to do?
Yeah.
Like, so
You got to fit it all in.
we're right there. We have no idea what to do. So I'm just trying to crowdsource this. Like, if all of a sudden 3 days fell into your lap, or like you have 3 days and you can just do anything. Like, I think that was what was crippling. It was just like, we can do anything. We should do everything. Maybe we should do nothing. What would you do?
How much time do you have to prepare?
It is next Friday.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So that's another thing. Like, I was already like looking up flights. Also, guys, I'm not going to be here next Friday. Just a heads up. But yeah, so I have until next Friday. So I was looking at flights. I was trying to keep it close because, you know, like in the event that we do fly somewhere, I don't want
You
to
are
spend a day
swinging
flying.
big.
Yeah.
Well, no. But then I was like, you know, do you do bed and breakfast?
No.
Just go.
I'll do what you want to do. I know you're one of those that's they got to be moving, but there is nothing wrong with doing nothing.
Yeah.
Like, sleep in. Enjoy the quiet.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that.
I know I want to do the staycation thing, but like previously when we've had like a day off and we were just like lazy, I feel like if I was lazy somewhere else, I'd feel better about doing nothing. You know, like
You're in your own head, man. Don't overthink it.
Yeah, he's falling apart.
I've got
He's
like
Just
5 days
go
to
out.
overthink.
He's got the yips. But
You can go out to a nice dinner and not worry about what time you have to get home.
I know.
Just
But what
keep
if I
it simple,
did that?
man.
What if I did that in Cuba? No.
All right,
I've got an idea for you.
Yeah.
Let me give you a quick hint. Aroo!
Oh man. I mean, I guess I'll propose that to her later. Like, how about
We have a
wolf-tastic weekend? I mean, that's
Surround ourselves with other people's children.
yeah. That's more realistic than anything going through my mind right now. So yes, anyone listening, Joe, if you're still with us live, any idea as to what you would do if 3 days fell into your lap? And I mean, hey, for some people, maybe it is just hanging out. Like, and I wish, yeah, I got to make sure I get ahead of everything that I need to do that during that time. You know, I got to make sure the curtain rods are up. Got to make sure the lawn is mowed, and then I can just relax.
All right.
Jeff, what's your final thought this week?
We were talking about you were talking about like getting that helicopter to market basically in like 2 months and all those advancements. Well, one of the things I realized is like dental procedures. We were talking a little bit about this last night, and Ben forecasted accurately that, you know, going to need a root canal.
Oh, yeah.
And I was dreading this because, you know, growing up, I hated going to the dentist, and the root canal was just like a sentencing. I mean, that was like, it didn't get worse than that. Now, apparently, it's not a big deal. Because I was talking to the dentist, I'm like, you know, does somebody need to take me in? Am I going to be out for the day? He's like, it's like getting a filling now.
Yeah.
So grateful for that
Yeah.
and how those things have advanced. And I guess if you need some prognostications, talk to Ben Munson about dental issues.
The advancements in modern dentistry, those are appreciated.
Yeah.
No, it's just, I hope they get it all in one. It's real simple. It's just, like I said, it's just the discomfort of it. That was the biggest thing.
I just hate going to the dentist. I've said this before, and I'm not looking forward to it, but it was reassuring that just sort of the nonchalance of this, like, we do this all the time, man. Don't worry about it.
Well, I guess it's good that you don't like going to the dentist. On the other side, I've been to the dentist so much that, like, he's a close personal friend. Like,
Maybe you can hang out with him next week.
Yeah, we just talk about our kids, we got a lot in common just because,
Well, you've probably paid for his house, so.
Oh, true. Maybe that's why he had the fourth kid. He's like, we can afford it with the Manties.
Yeah, Manty's coming in.
All right. Well, before we get out of here, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You could also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. If you want to email the podcast, you can reach any of us at Jeff, David, or Anna at IN.com with email the podcast in the subject line. You can also subscribe to our daily newsletter. Make sure you get it delivered to your inbox first. All right. For Jeff Franke and Anna Wells, I'm David Manty. This is the Today in Manufacturing podcast, and we will see you next week.